Oh, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on which part of this beautiful country that you're in. You're watching the Rebel News Now daily show, Rebel Roundup. I'm your host, Sheila Gunn Reid, and I'm joined by, I guess, a rotating cast of characters. Today, in that slot, is my friend and colleague, Tamara Ugolini. Tamara, how's it going?
Hey, Sheila, it's going pretty good. Thanks. How are you over on the west side? Still freezing cold?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Tis
Yeah,
the season, I
really.
suppose.
Yeah, really looking forward to that, carbon tax hike. Like, my husband
Yeah.
and I were talking the other day about, like, the cost of the carbon tax factoring into our gas bill, and, like, we're pretty frugal, with, our fossil fuels around here, despite what the federal government would have you believe, that we're just, like, running the furnace and opening the doors, and we need this carbon tax to correct our bad behavior. But, like, we were looking, and just even 2 months of, uh, the carbon tax on top of our pittance of a gas bill just eats away at whatever carbon tax rebate they think they're sending you, that where you'll get richer from the federal government. And we're like, it's just on this one thing. It's like buy after 2 months. So what a scam anyway.
We'll take your money and then we'll somehow make up for it later with a fraction of what we took from the entirety of the Canadian population. I think David Menzies did a wonderful piece on the Enbridge, his Enbridge bill. And I mean, I have been noticing this over the last year and a bit, but especially with each incremental hike that the Liberals institute on us. And my last bill was crazy. I think the total was like $260 or something. We have a lot of glazing, a lot of windows. And anyway, I've been bugging my husband to do something about that, to tighten it up, because our bills are crazy now with the carbon tax. And out of that $268, our actual gas usage was something like $68.
Yeah.
And the carbon tax was actually more than our usage. But because they tack on all these fees and expenses and delivery this and tax on there, the carbon tax amounts to more than our breakdown of our pure straight gas usage. It is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I think we use like $54 in gas, and the rest, like hundreds of dollars of additional fees and the carbon tax. And I don't know how you can heat a house for less than $54 in Alberta. Like, I don't know how we can get that number down. But the feds sure think we can, because they're taxing us to change our behavior, so they say. But enough complaining about bills that we all have to face. I should tell everybody what we're doing here, and then I'll tell everybody how they can give us a little bit of their money if they'd like, if they have any money left over after Justin Trudeau and the utility companies are done with you. As I said, this is the Rebel Roundup. It's a daily show now. We're doing our best to talk about the news of the day completely unscripted, as you can tell. And you'll get some of our hot takes or spicy takes, and you're going to get our opinions sometimes as we watch these clips with you for the very first time, although I do my best to prep before I get on the show. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for sticking it out over there. I appreciate your stubbornness. I'm like that too. But if you'd like to support us here at Rebel News, like I said, if you have some money left over and you just want to support the little network that could, might I suggest you head on over to Rumble. It's a great free speech platform. They are not going to censor you. They don't censor us. And they allow you, unlike YouTube, which has demonetized us, to send us your support in the form of what's called a Rumble rant. If it's over the $5 US cutoff, we're obligating ourselves to read it on air. We're making it mandatory. But if it's under that $5 US cutoff, we generally make the time as best we can, but there's no guarantee that you'll read it on air. But we do appreciate you, because every little bit helps. So that's sort of the rules around here. Let's get right into Donald Trump changing the culture, like in his first 6 minutes on the job. So President Trump's peace through strength diplomacy is working, says White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, whom I really enjoy. And she cites the tariff threats against Mexico and Canada as the reason both countries committed to increasing border security. I'm worried Justin Trudeau isn't going to meet his obligations, and then we're all going to get hammered again by tariffs. But let's just see.
We've already seen the results from President Trump's bold peace through strength diplomacy on the world stage. In response to President Trump's tariffs this week, both Mexico and Canada took immediate steps to alleviate the illegal alien migration and flow of deadly drugs, particularly fentanyl, into our country. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to permanently supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the U.S. border, who will be specifically designated to stopping fentanyl and criminal aliens from pouring into our country. And Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau agreed to appoint a fentanyl czar, list cartels as terrorists, and increase resources to assist the 10,000 frontline personnel at our northern border with Canada. In recognition of these steps, President Trump paused the implementation of tariffs for 1 month while negotiations continue and final deals can be structured.
I'm worried.
For 1 month. Yeah. Well,
I'm worried. Go ahead.
As we talked at length earlier in the week on the live stream, was it Monday or Wednesday? Anyway, I don't remember. But it's shocking that it took this long and these threats for the Liberals to finally take action. We've had a whole campaign at fixourcities.com. I think we might also have .ca, calling on the government to do just that: clean up the streets, curb the crime, bring back, a judicial system that actually acts in the best interest of restoring justice in the country, and get the drugs off of the streets. The things that are happening in cities, towns, and parks all across this country is nothing new to anybody who has been paying attention the last few years, and it's crept out. It's not just isolated anymore in the big cities. It's like homeless sprawl, urban sprawl has come out into these small towns and municipalities who don't have the social services or the infrastructure to assist with these issues. And so it's become a real problem. And we've been highlighting that, reporting on it, shining a light on it for the better part of a year, maybe even closer to 2 years since that campaign was first launched. And finally, it took not Canadians caring about the safety of their streets or the drug problem, but for the United States president to point it out and threaten tariffs for the government to finally take action. It's absurd.
I just, out of the corner of my eye, I was like, how many people have actually died of fentanyl in Canada? Because I thought, if the number is large, then it is, of course, a failing of the federal government to act to keep Canadians safe. Like they moved heaven and earth and they shut everything down for 3 years over COVID. And that only affected basically the elderly and people that a strong wind would kill in some instances. Canada has recorded 50,000 deaths of fentanyl since 2016, and this data is from the end of 2024. So, and that number is only going up. I think it is, according to the data, anyways, it's a 39% increase since 2016, that it is fentanyl. Of opioid deaths, fentanyl accounts for 79% of that. So if you want to take a bite out of the fentanyl or the opioid deaths, then you have to go after the fentanyl specifically. I think it's 11 people a day right now are dying that they know of. I mean, take that for what you will. But that doesn't even take into account the people who die of other things because of their fentanyl addiction, like hepatitis or freezing to death or alcohol abuse or like just the lifestyle, the problems of living a dangerous lifestyle. Like you might end up murdered at the hands of your pimp or a John because you're hooked on fentanyl. And the government is doing nothing to stop the trafficking into this country. So this is a nationwide crisis. And our prime minister only acted because he was forced to do the right thing by the leader of another country. He was never, ever going to do the right thing by Canadians. And we know that because of how his government treats the drug problem in this country. They are acting as the drug dealers and the enablers, like literally the opposite of the advice that they give a family experiencing this. Don't give money to the drug addict, let them hit rock bottom, then have a zero tolerance for their drug use. The government acted as the enablers in all of this. They've made the problem excessively worse.
Yeah, the data that I pulled, this report is a year old. So end of January 2024. I did a report on the Liberals' misguided billion-dollar drug strategy, which has only seen an increase in overdoses and subsequently overdose deaths, because they do make that differentiation, because we have the saving grace of Narcan, which is a taxpayer-funded temporary saving strategy, pharmaceutical product, to counteract the effects of a fentanyl overdose. But anyway, this is a report. I featured a report published by Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada, evaluating the Canadian Drugs and Substances Strategy. So that's a thing that the federal government has implemented. It's called CDSS. And a tabulation of the strategy in the first 5 years that it ran, so from 2017 until 2022, shows that overdose and drug-related deaths continue to rise in Canada, despite the federal government spending more than $800 million in a failed attempt to curb the overdose crisis. And then there was an additional $352 million over 5 years, implemented by former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland in budget 2023 to renew. She actually renewed this failing strategy a year after these 5 years of tabulation showed that it wasn't doing anything and it was actually only making the problem worse, totaling their budget allocation to this failed strategy to be over $1 billion of taxpayer dollars. This is absolute madness. And now here we are in the beginnings of 2025. And finally, we see the government is saying, oh, wait a minute. Now we're going to listen to the concerns of a foreign president and take notice that our strategy obviously isn't working and we need to do something to curb the crime and clean up our streets, not for the Canadian people, but because we're bowing to the whim of the US president.
Yeah, like why does Donald Trump care more about Canadians dying from fentanyl than our prime minister, or for that matter, our idiot stick of a health minister, Mark Holland, who has run his mouth at every instance. You know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go back and watch Mark Holland's appearances at the health committee on this topic. He's sitting there testifying, being questioned by the Conservatives, while parents who've had children die of fentanyl are sitting right there saying, look, we're handling this. We're doing the right thing. We're making life better. And there's parents of dead teenagers sitting right there. And he's got absolutely no empathy or understanding of the government's role in what happened to their child. And now he's kind of got to eat those words because they're appointing a fentanyl czar and it's not him, because he has actually been the fentanyl kingpin of this country for the last little bit, between him, of course, and Bonnie Henry, leading the drug cartel here in this country.
Yeah, Bonnie Henry in British Columbia, which is the fentanyl hub of the country and one of the main ports of entry, as we're finding out and hearing from between the US and Canada, and the place where this has really been an escalating and ongoing thing. British Columbia was the province that pioneered this, supposed drug strategy, safer, as though there's any form of safe supply of illicit and highly addictive and highly toxic drugs. They've been at this since, I think it was 2014 or 15. I mean, it's been
way
20,
before that.
Maybe even, before that.
Yeah, I think they've been doing their safe supply nonsense and what were dubbed shooting galleries, a safe place to do your drugs. And then it became a safe place to do and get your drugs. They've got a generation's worth of data from the downtown east side on this. And instead of making things better, more people are addicted than ever. More people are dying of overdoses in British Columbia than ever. And the social decay that was small and limited to one place has spread and spread and spread like a cancer across the society. And now their safe supply is ending up in Alberta, killing Albertans.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have the leader of the official opposition, Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, announcing that he will bring back our justice system and throw away the key for fentanyl kingpins. He says that Canada should do this without pressure from Donald Trump. I mean, where have you guys been the last few years? But nonetheless, here we are to protect Canadians from this soft on crime liberal approach.
President Trump has threatened to tariff Canada because of what he says is lethal drug flows. But whether or not we agree with him should not matter. It should not take a foreign leader to get the Liberals to wake up to the drug crisis that they have caused here at home. It should have been enough that we lost 50,000 of our people. We should crack down on drugs, not to please President Trump, but to ensure that not one more mother has to bury her face in her hands on learning that her son died of an overdose in a back alley somewhere. We must stop drugs to save our people and put Canada first. It starts with locking up mass traffickers and manufacturers of this poison with penalties that fit the crime. But what is that crime? Let's call fentanyl trafficking what it is. Mass murder. Selling 40 milligrams of this poison is enough to kill 20 people. It's like spraying bullets into a crowd. You might not know who you're killing, but it's certain someone will die. That's why I'm denouncing today, as part of my Canada First plan, that common sense conservatives will bring mandatory prison sentences. There will be life sentences for anyone caught trafficking, producing, or exporting over 40 milligrams of fentanyl. 40 milligrams is enough to kill 20 people. Anyone who is involved in trafficking that amount of fentanyl will get a life sentence. We will lock them up and we will throw away the key. And 15 years for traffickers caught with between 20 milligrams and 40 milligrams will be the new mandatory sentence.
Yeah, it was the bail reform that the Liberals brought in that has seen these criminals just released back onto the streets within hours of being arrested, even repeat offenders. So the fact that our judicial system is basically just preoccupied with whether or not people are gender identifying in the right way that the government wants to see them identifying as, we don't have a robust criminal justice system at this point, and it's been that way for several years. And now, it's the everyday Canadian reeling and living that on the streets that we see. I'm glad that Trump has prompted this conversation to happen on this broader political scale. But I really wonder where all of these conversations were years ago when it's people like us, the little guy, started reporting on it, listening to the everyday person on the street, the underdog in many ways, in many instances, and including the people who are quote unquote, the most vulnerable, the homeless people themselves and drug addicts themselves that say, we can't get help, we can't get resources. I remember one of the first reports that I did when I first joined Rebel in the fall of 2020, I interviewed a homeless man in Kingston, Ontario, and their hub of drug addiction and safer supply was getting really bad at that time and really harming the local community and neighborhood there, where they were seeing the chaos on the streets, the crime, the overdoses, the open air drug use. But this one particular homeless man was disabled, and he was in a wheelchair. He didn't have use of one of his legs or had some sort of, I don't remember all the details of his story, but he couldn't get into safe housing because it was all, here he is, Peter. He couldn't get into safe housing because it was all being catered to drug addicts. And so anywhere that he went, he felt more unsafe living in supportive and subsidized housing, as they like to call it, because of the drug use and the chaos that was happening in these buildings. So he actually felt safer living outside in a tent than utilizing these supposed supports and safer supply hubs that were being welcomed and promoted in the community.
Yeah, we've been really doing our best to drive this conversation because the normals are forgotten in all about that. In all of this, it's the academics who say oh, this is what we have to do to treat people, when it's not treatment at all. There are two ways out of addiction. You get clean or you die. Now, if you go on safe supply, it just prolongs your suicide. It might slow it down. Actually, it might not. Who even knows? The data shows that they don't know, and actually nobody ever gets clean. But to be fair, on the health committee, there is one conservative MP that we really should acknowledge, because he's been raw and very open with his reasons for opposing safe supply, and that's Todd Doherty. He's a conservative MP. As I said, he's on the health committee. And I just think every time that Todd Doherty has to listen to these academics talk about safe supply, or Mark Holland say that the conservatives don't care about people who are addicted because they have a different viewpoint about getting people clean and getting them back and functional in society and return to their families, instead of having them prolong the demon within them. Todd Doherty, he has been very open about this. I'm not speaking out of turn. Grew up in an abusive household. That Todd Doherty, you can find, it's in the Prince George Citizen if you want to find the article, read it for yourself. He opens up a lot, probably more than he needed to, but I appreciate his honesty. But the abuse that he and his brother suffered at the hands of someone in his family, he just uses the word she to describe her. It's by the grace of God that Todd Doherty is not addicted on the street, given the childhood trauma that he experienced. However, his brother is. mentally ill, drug addicted, and homeless. And so imagine, like Todd Doherty has been so strong on this issue. He's the one bringing the parents to committee so that they have a voice, and he has lived this. And imagine having to sit there and listen to an idiot like Mark Holland say, what your brother needs is more drugs.
Yeah, the left really loves to capitalize on the people with supposed lived experiences. But I don't hear anyone, apart from some of the conservative members like Layla Goodridge as well, has been a really loud voice. She's also in the health committee. She was the one that sounded the alarm when mothers who were giving birth in hospital were being exposed to fentanyl fumes because the addicts were allowed to come in and use their drugs inside of the hospital, with mothers who are quite literally giving birth to newborn babies. But I don't hear ever the lived experience of, the children who grew up with drug addicted parents and the devastation and the chaos and the turmoil and the destruction of their family units.
Everything.
And just the overall trauma that these children experience, and many of them unfortunately go through life, as Todd's mentioned, and become addicts themselves or have some other mental health issues. And so perhaps they're not the best advocates, but there are a lot of children of drug addicted parents who actually stay away and steer clear of that lifestyle because they've seen the fallout and the devastation that it causes. And I don't ever hear from any of them. And the other person too, I just want to mention as an outspoken against this idea of safer supply is also the conservative shadow minister of health, Stephen Ellis, who's also a practicing licensed family physician, which Mark Holland, who's our Minister of Health, with thanks to the Justin Trudeau Liberals, is not. He's a seasoned politician. He's a lifetime bureaucrat. And I think his background is in economics, not at all in medicine or health.
Yeah, and we can tell since he's a Liberal, he's also bad at that.
Well, and this is big business, right? Fentanyl. Right. So it makes you wonder.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. A lot of these people in the poverty and drug addiction industry, if you solve the problem, their jobs go away, right? So you definitely can't solve the problem. You have to keep your customers going for a while, which I think is what Safe Supply does. Also, a hat tip to Dan Williams here in Alberta. He's our mental health and addictions minister. I think just about everybody who works in his office is in active recovery. So he's surrounded himself with people who, again, lived experience, as the left likes to say. They know what it takes to become clean and functional. And I think they've pretty well had it with people telling them what addicts need, when the recovered addicts, I think pretty well might be the ones with the expertise on this. But that hasn't stopped the mainstream media from being idiotic on this. Poilievre, in that same press conference, shut down a reporter and calls it the Liberals for using the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to defend, of all people, fentanyl dealers, mass murderers.
If you kill dozens of people, you should go away for life. And that is what we will do. I will lock up these fentanyl murderers and we will throw away the key. And I will do it not just to save lives, but to uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
En français. But would you use 33 to insulate the law so it doesn't get bat down in court?
Oh, it won't. No, well, because the judges are going to be obliged to by Section 7. It's clear that people have the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. So what I'm proposing is necessary to uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And you do not have the right to go out and kill 20 or 30 people by spreading poison in the community. That is not a charter right. So the Liberals believe that mass fentanyl murderers who have taken 50,000 lives have the right to go free on the streets. That is how they interpret the charter. Here's how I interpret the charter. That law-abiding people have the right to expect that their children will not die in back alleys. That's the charter right I will uphold. Next question.
It's really refreshing to see someone who has a backbone and can take some heat from the mainstream media and stick to their conviction, and not just kind of dance around with these weird mental gymnastics and patronizing breathless responses as we've seen, for the past almost decade from Justin Trudeau and people like Chrystia Freeland. It's so refreshing to see actual dialogue with clear, succinct responses, not these dancing around, going everywhere, but the answer to the actual question. I just want to get to one of our super chats, or Rumble rants, I should say.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we got one from Jutta Bursey, who gives $5. Thank you very much. So JT, that's Justin Trudeau, agrees to a border czar after Danielle Smith said that was needed. Love Caroline Press Secretary. She absolutely rocks. My J is silent in my first name. Oh, so it's Jutta Bursey. Utah. Thanks, Sheila. My pronunciation is always terrible. Jutta Bursey. Thank you.
Yuta's a regular donor to the show and a regular watcher, and I always say her name both ways. And she's probably written to me several times telling me how exactly to say it, but I keep forgetting. And so now I promise I will remember. Yuta, thank you very much. We also have an ad from our friends at Rumble that we need to read. Why? Because we're demonetized on YouTube, and my blue lights are making it look like I have 5 o'clock shadow. I definitely don't. I think my hormones are in check these days. Anyway, I'll read that right now. So if you have a dog, we've all been there. Our pup goes from full of energy to sick and miserable in an instant. And of course, at the worst of times, we're calling vets in the middle of the night or on weekends, trying to find a clinic that will take us in. It's a terrible way to manage your dog's health, not to mention your stress levels and your monthly budget. That's why people are getting the Pet Emergency Kit by Positive, and it's spelt the cute way, PAWSITIVE. It contains critical medications and supplies that can not only keep your dog out of the veterinary office, but may also save your dog's life. Their kit contains critical medications like activated charcoal, styptic powder, and more. It might save your dog's life. Head on over to Positive. Again, that's the cute spelling, positive.com, and use the code STUDIO to get 15% off your Pet Emergency Kit. Now, I think we have a couple of Rebel ads to run, and then we'll go into more from the federal government. I think it is on, if I go back up, Trudeau discussing diversifying trade exports while dancing around, I believe, the issue of oil exports. So let's hit an ad break and then we'll go into that.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. Members get instant access to all of our shows, invitations to exclusive events, and access to our premium content like live event footage and documentaries you won't see anywhere else. Only Rebel News Plus members can join the conversation by participating in the comments section of our new website. That way you can have your say too. More than anything, though, you'll be able to take pride in supporting real, honest journalism, and you'll help our talented team continue to do the work to push back on the establishment. We really can use your help. We need it, in fact. So thank you, and enjoy Rebel News Plus.
right. I want to subscribe after listening to Ezra's impassioned speech there. We've got Trudeau discussing diversifying our trade exports and, quote, deepening our energy links. But he doesn't actually say what that means.
Of course.
No, of course not. I know what it should mean, but I don't think he does.
Trade with the US. Now, there's a lot of talk about diversification. We'll get to that as well. But let's face some facts here. We are Canada. Geography means we're always going to both benefit and be challenged by trade with the United States. It's always going to be a big chunk of our economy. Can we be deliberate and strategic about where we're creating deeper partnerships that make sense? Where we're looking at whether it's critical minerals that are going to be so essential for the future and that international suppliers are a little more unreliable on, and certain countries are unreliable on, whether it's moving forward on energy and deepening our energy links in a positive way that actually solidifies those ties and makes them less vulnerable to the vagaries of politics. Can we be thoughtful and deliberate about the kinds of partnerships that enhance and create true win-wins, but also give us a little more protection against political rhetoric in the United States? These are things we can deliberately look at, that we are looking at.
The vagaries of politics.
Right. I literally wrote that down.
Coming from the guy who has done nothing but try to destroy our natural resource sector and utilize everything but Canadian minerals, oil, and gas. This is it's such an inversion of reality. I don't know what world Trudeau lives in or who the heck's writing his scripts.
Yeah. How do you like this? The speech was literally an example of the vagaries of politics. Like, how do you talk about deepening our energy ties without using the word pipelines? Because that's what it means. Like, that's what it means. If we want to, they say diversify, but again, with the vagaries of politics, what it means is phase out oil and gas. That's what they mean when they say diversify every single time. But our energy links, what would link this country together with regard to our natural resources? Maybe an east-west pipeline that actually goes through the entirety of Canada. Instead, right now, we've got a pipeline, thanks to Justin Trudeau, that because we canceled Energy East, which would have been a project that increased Canada's energy security flowing from Alberta to the east. But right now, we've got a pipeline that comes from Alberta, cuts into the United States, Line 9 and Line 5, and then comes back up into Canada, which means Trump could turn that pipeline off in a heartbeat if he wanted to. And you know who doesn't have oil and gas? Quebec and Ontario. You know who won't let us build pipelines? Quebec. Legault says, like we would only do it if there's social acceptability. You know what's socially unacceptable? $6 a liter fuel. Because you don't get it because it's cut off. And right now, a full 47% of their oil and gas actually is from fracked gas from the United States. But some of you might not know, fracking is banned in Quebec. Now, we frack everything. We frack everywhere in Alberta, and it's not a catastrophe. In fact, we grow your food here, so settle down, everybody. But they banned fracking in Quebec, but they're not against fracked gas because they get it from the United States. They're just against fracking jobs in Quebec. So it's just a big mess. Right now, we should be talking about creating a spiderweb network of pipelines in all directions, starting in Alberta and terminating at every seaport in this country. But we're not. We're just talking about energy connections, the vagaries of politics.
Diversifying those sources of reliable, consistent, and affordable energy. You mentioned Premier Legault's comments to Alexa Lavoie. We have a clip here, I think, we have one clip here. Yeah, let's play that one. And so you're not taking our word for it. He actually says that there needs to be social acceptability of pipelines.
Yeah.
Mr. Legault, how come you don't agree with Premier Smith's idea to build new oil and gas pipeline to first diversify our export markets, so we are not only trading with America, given Trump's tariff threat. So she said that it would make Canada stronger. Do you believe that too?
I just answered this question. It's the same thing. We talk about EnergyS or GNL. I think that we need to have social acceptability. And if Daniel Smith or whoever tabled projects, will look at them, but we need to have social acceptability.
Yeah.
Maybe if the vagaries of politics didn't lead everyone to believe that these were somehow polluting, dirty energy sources, then there would be more social acceptability. And I think that as people see this hit them in their pocketbooks where it really hurts, they're starting to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe this green revolution isn't what it was made out and sold to all of us to be. And we'd like to just get back to a good old-fashioned oil and gas.
Yeah, it's funny. For someone who lives in Alberta, and we are one of the most natural and wild places in this country. I think just when you see pictures of Alberta, you see we grow your food, and there's pump jacks in the distance, which means we grow your food on top of an energy site. Or you see these pictures of mountains, and it's picturesque and beautiful. But you should know there are pipelines going through those mountains. And it's interesting for me as an Albertan to live in this vast, wild, natural place, to get lectures about what is clean and what's dirty from the concrete jungle people. You know what I mean? I'm like, you guys, when was the last time you got off pavement, my guy? And it's probably maybe once in a year. And I've got to listen to these people tell me about how polluting and dirty we are, when I can check my air quality index, because the oil companies monitor that just for the sake of calming the worry wards. And my air quality index, just up the road from what's colloquially known as Upgrader Alley, is always better than Vancouver, Montreal, Quebec City, definitely Toronto. And I live like in the what's called the industrial heartland. That's what they call it here, the place in which I live. And it's always, like I said, it's always interesting for me to see the people, oh God, we can't have those polluting Albertans. And I'm like, it's pretty nice around here. What are you talking about?
There's lots of trees exchanging that carbon dioxide for oxygen
Yeah.
that Trudeau likes to pollute when he jet sets here, there, and everywhere, whether it be his lavish vacations or his globalist parties where they discuss how to keep all of us from flying and heating our homes efficiently, while they all gather and eat filet mignon and have their private jets and their cocktails in endless amounts. Or Davos. Sheila, you were just there. You saw the peak hypocrisy of these elites taking a plane to their main airport, then either private shuttling in with, either by limousine or another, high caliber vehicle, helicopters, private jets, the list goes on and on. The carbon footprint of these people is insane compared to just what our small individual necessities of life would be, aside from living a lavish lifestyle of travel and meet and greets that could easily be done on Zoom.
Yeah, that was the San Moritz private airstrip there. We caught a plane just landing, a private jet just landing. That was the last jet of the day because weather shut everybody in. But yeah, we went out there, and then you jump off your private jet. By the way, you can look at all of the ads for luxury watches, cars, whatever, on your way through this little private, super private airport. Where they have like a high-end buffet that we got there early. And you can see where the high-end buffet had been, but they had taken it all down because of the weather. And then you fly to you get on a helicopter, and then you fly to the specially built private airport right in the middle of town. Local residents dealing with the noise be damned. So these people can get in there and lecture me about having to have a low-flow shower head to save the planet. Like, it's just ridiculous.
The absolute insanity. And emboldenedness of these individuals is just, I mean, people are starting to see it more and more for what it is, and they're starting to say, wait a minute, this no longer makes sense. And I think that as the United States takes action to cut the bureaucratic bloat, to weed out this ridiculous spending that we have, the country has invested on behalf of the taxpayers, who in many instances have no idea what any of this stuff is for, where it's going, or that it's even happening at all. And I think Canada has seen and will continue to see the repercussions of that and start to pay more attention and demand the same of our leaders here. I hope it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, let's keep going, because we've got we've got extra time now, because we're not tightening it up to just the 1 hour. But we've got Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet taking aim at Canada's federal parties for favoring the interests of Ontario and Western Canada. Is this guy out of his mind? Like, since when the hell was Western Canada favored by the federal government? He really is in some kind of Quebec-style bubble. But let's listen to this, and then we'll chat about it.
We are living through the proof that big Canadian parties are going to walk on us, literally, favoring the interests of Toronto and Ontario and its banks, or the interests of Western Canada and oil and gas. And in the same day, we see those two things. Could we literally scrap supply management? It's bad for other Canadian economic interests. We should trade, say, okay, we forget supply management, so important for Quebec. We'll deal something good for Ontario car industry. And we also hear people, including Mr. Carney, say, okay, now it's time. We will come in Quebec with pipelines that will, at the end, we will get it. We will go through Quebec with pipelines, and we will go in the cemetery and dig out the project of natural gas in Saguenay.
Yeah, good.
Using a crisis that people fear to defend and promote interests which are against Quebec. And it has to be noticed as it is. Mischievous enthusiasm. This poll comes at a good moment. First, it has been made during the worst part of a crisis which has been created by the American president. And it did make people afraid of what was coming. And at this very moment, there was a poll. I understand that people are afraid. And if it does bring back interest on Quebec, we will have the opportunity to speak to those leaders of Canadian parties about the fact that they want to walk on us with oil and gas. They want to trade supply management against us. We will have the opportunity to speak about lumberwood, about aluminum, about artificial intelligence, about aeronautics, about what makes us what we are. And nobody is speaking about what Quebec is but Bloc Québécois. We may be friends with anybody who intends to deal in a fair way, but somebody who wants to deal against us will pay a very heavy and long-lasting price.
I think that's enough of him.
Yeah. So
we want to talk about the vagaries of politics, and there was a lot of that in there. What kind of the doomsday rhetoric? It was just crazy. You know, people are so scared, and they're going to walk on us, and they're using a crisis, and this mischievous enthusiasm. These are such weird, inflammatory words for them to be using. But I guess that is the norm when you're a fringe party. And Quebec, I remember Alexa did a report on Quebec and their energy grid, specifically their electric energy grid. And even Hydro-Quebec on its website says, the first sentence, I think it is, Hydro-Quebec produces enough electricity to supply the entire province, except during winter peaks in Quebec when it's freezing cold and your battery is not going to last outside in the freezing cold. And so what are you going to do in Quebec when you can heat the entire and supply the entire province except for in peak winter? We're just going to normalize people freezing. Why not have a reliable, efficient, and consistent source of energy to, you know, bridge that gap? This is crazy talk.
Well, and just the insanity of this man. Like, and again, the Bloc exists to promote Quebec interests. Okay, but you could actually do it without lying. He says that, you know, the federal government is favoring the West. Since when? We can't get a pipeline built to Quebec. And the reason we want to build a pipeline to Quebec is so that Quebecers can have reliable Alberta energy. We're trying to help you, dummy. He says that, you know, like Western interests are favored. Okay, so we can't get a job in the federal government unless we're fluent in French, regardless of what part of this country that you work in. You can't get a job at Service Canada in Fort McMurray unless you are fluent in French. Canadians cannot be the prime minister these days unless we're fluent in French. So that excludes some very strong Western candidates. You can't be on the Supreme Court unless you're fluent in French. Again, excluding some strong Western candidates. And while we're talking about Western interests being favored, let's talk about SNC Lavalin. Lavalin, if you're listening to how they say it at the CBC. That's a corrupt Quebec company that was getting sweetheart deals from the federal government simply because they were from Quebec. It's a bit much to listen to Mr. Quebec, who gets half of all the equalization payments in this country, complain about the West getting favored. The West pays the majority of those equalization payments. I think this year it's $26.2 billion in equalization that is being transferred around the country. The majority of it comes from, all of it comes from the have provinces. Guess who the have provinces are? That's it. And Quebec is taking in half of it, going up every year. So if you want to keep getting your free stuff from the West, Mr. Quebec first, and that's fine, but you have to let us work. If you need us to support you, you have to let us work. It's like a stay-at-home wife making her husband stay home because she's lonely. If you want to stay in that house all day, he's got to go to work. You got to let us work, Quebec, so you can be a kept woman.
I love that analogy for this clip. It definitely makes sense. Just before we wrap up this segment on the federal government, we have Trudeau yesterday going up and celebrating his ability to be ruthless in his final weeks in power. Just, this guy is so drunk on power. It's crazy.
I know.
I have to admit, my friends, I'm a little bit emotional tonight. One of the things that comes with knowing that you're on a countdown clock to your last day means you get to be really ruthless about the things you want to do and the things that you don't want to do. And let me tell you, if I am here tonight with you all, it's because, man, oh man, did I want to see you guys to celebrate one last Black History Month as Prime Minister.
Oh, of course he had to. He had to just get that last little social justice warrior claim in there.
I'm just so glad he's not in blackface. So that's a new development. But he says he gets to be more ruthless now that he doesn't have to worry about re-election or whatever. My question is, how the hell are we supposed to know the difference? Because he's been pretty ruthless, from arresting political dissidents, seizing their bank accounts, imposing speech restrictions on Canadians, ruthless in his climate policy, ruthless in denying the ability of Albertans to create jobs and wealth for the rest of the country. He's controlling the internet, and calling anybody to the right of Chairman Mao some sort of radical extremist. Look at the language he used to describe the convoy. So if that wasn't ruthless, I'm scared to see what he thinks is ruthless.
Yeah, that's a good point. Justin Trudeau ruthlessly bloated the bureaucracy at 3 times the size and pace as the private sector, as the government's COVID-19 response was decimating small businesses all across the country and eliminating permanently, in many instances, those ma and pop shops that made Canada and built the country on their backbone. And then he increased our taxes. Our taxes currently outpace our basic living necessities like food, shelter, and clothing combined. And that's been a consistent theme throughout his reign of terror on the country of Canada. Bloat the bureaucracy, get more taxes, put this carbon tax into place, implement it on April Fool's Day each year, or increase it on April Fool's Day each year, April 1st, at the same time as all MPs get their yearly raise, regardless of how disastrous their policy and representation has been on the political scale. So yeah, if we're talking that we're going to get more ruthless in this regard, I don't know what kind of additional destruction he can do to this country in this last month, but I'm nervous for it.
Yeah. And like Mark Carney has been the brains of the operation.
Right.
So I think we'll just get more of the same, but on steroids, but somehow possibly more boring. If you've listened to Mark Carney talk, it's just at least Justin Trudeau is irritatingly interesting to listen to just because of how he speaks and that drama teacher annoyingness. But Mark Carney is just like, it's like listening to Charlie Brown's mom talk, just wah, 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 wah in the background. It's just terrible. We've got a couple of ad reads and chats. You want to do the chats? I'll do the ad read.
Sounds good. We have Nana Awake gives $10. Thank you very much, Nana. My 10-year-old granddaughter who lived with her dad, who was very good at hiding his addiction until he couldn't. She thought she was protecting him, so didn't say anything. Her healing is our focus. Yeah, I'm really, that's the devastating part, is the innocent children who are caught in the midst of the drug chaos that has been unfolding on our streets and in our country for the last several years. And the perpetuation of it by the political class, who clearly have no, as we've already said, lived experience with what this is actually like to deal with on as an individual, on an individual level, but as a child who has no say and no choice in the matter. The advocates who want this safer supply and all these initiatives for drug addicts to coddle them so that they never actually overdose and die, which is the inevitable part of having an addiction, which is why you need to get out of that cycle of addiction, homelessness, deception, crime, theft, et cetera, by getting proper help and having the resources available to reintegrate you into being a functioning member of society and give you something purposeful and responsibility to, increase your ability to live a clean life and be on the trajectory to being a responsible person and citizen and so on and so forth. But it's these children, they don't have a choice or a say in many times in any of this. And then, sadly, a lot of them end up in the system if they don't have family members like their awake nanas who can, take them under their wing and give them a better life. And that is the really sad part of this, that those children who don't have a choice also don't have a voice. And in my opinion, those are the most vulnerable people in this situation, not the drug addict who has their addiction perpetuated by advocates and government ivory tower dwelling bureaucrats who want this idea of a safer supply of illicit, toxic, deadly drugs.
Yeah. And I've got a sorry, before we move on, I've got a theory about all of this, and a theory with the godless left and why they just decide that drug addicts are beyond redemption. It's because they believe nobody is redeemable. Like, you and I go around talking the good word of conservatism and personal responsibility and a skepticism of the government and government that should fit inside of a teacup and that families make the best decisions. And then when we get a taker, I think it should be our view to say, okay, well, you thought leftism was right, but you changed your mind. And so we don't have a litmus test, a purity test before someone joins the conservative movement. If we did, there would be no point in talking to the people, right? Because if you're just going to hold people to account for the things they did before, then why even bother trying to change their minds? They're irredeemable. And we see this with the left with cancel culture. They think that they can dig through your social media for something you said when you were 17, and that should cancel you when you're 40, because they don't believe people are redeemable. And you can see this completely playing out right now with how they treat drug addicts. They think that there is no inherent value in a person, for whatever reason. Maybe you take a secular viewpoint. Maybe you're like me and you take a religious worldview that you're created in the image of God. And so you inherently are born with value, and that makes you redeemable. But they don't feel that way about people. They don't see anything in people that makes them valuable because they're humans born alive. And so they just think that you should just be damned to whatever your social circumstances are, that only the rich can stay rich and the normals should stay normals and maybe even get poorer. You shouldn't have any social capital. You shouldn't try to have any power in society. And if you are a drug addict, that's where you shall stay. And I think it's a real problem with the left, and it has to do with the absence of God in their lives, if I had to really drill down. But I think that's why. Anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
It's a really interesting take. And also they want to invest into perpetuation and enablement of addiction rather than invest into a person's ability and capability to get themselves out of the addiction and reintegrate into society and become a productive member once again of a community, of a neighborhood. They're all about, our communities and our neighbors is a lot of the rhetoric I see about when they're advocating for enablement of drug addiction. And it's like, but this isn't what makes a neighborhood or a community. It's a collective of individuals coming together to, give whatever they can as a person that is, when they're capable of being a part of a community that does things to better the community, not descend into this perpetual destruction and chaos and crime and sneaking and theft and all the things that go along with addiction. It's very well documented what people do and the lengths that they will go to sustain their addiction. It is horrific what happens on the streets. And instead of, saying, that this probably isn't a good place for people to end up, and how do we get them better and lift them out of the throes of this disgusting disease? No, there's safer supply. So let's just make sure that the taxpayers fund it all. And we will partner up with Big Pharma so that we can create more customers instead of cures, right? That's Big Pharma's business model. And it just is this endless cycle when I think it's very clear that we can break the chains of that cycle and get people back to being responsible, upstanding citizens once again. Because if we're not, then what kind of anarchy are we going to descend into?
Right. If you think about it this way, the elites want to stay up here. If you look at all their policies, this is what they are designed to do, whether it is climate policy, taxation, immigration, healthcare, drugs, whatever. They are doing things to make sure they stay up here and you stay down here. And you will never be able to travel up to here. They're putting barriers in the way to make sure that you never reach them. It's one of the reasons they want to keep Alberta from achieving its economic prosperity, I guess is how I would put it, is because those pesky high school graduates have no business making $250,000 a year. We're from Laurentia. we can't have those people anywhere near us. And so we instill climate policies, 15-minute cities, drug problems, just to make sure that you never pass through those other socioeconomic zones to get anywhere near them. That's my theory. Anyways, I'll be quiet. Next chat, please.
Nana Awake also gives $2. Thanks again. Quebec says pipelines east are socially unacceptable and is discouraging people from buying from Alberta. So Team Canada excludes us. So equalization payments are socially and financially unacceptable. Yeah, that's an interesting take as well.
Yeah. No pipelines, no equalization. There are a lot of bumper stickers out here in Alberta that literally say that one thing. No pipelines? ? No equalization! ! And I do not disagree.
Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of do, because I live in the province of Ontario, as I like to call it these days, and I have been for a while, but I just think there needs to be more utilization of our energy sector, instead of framing it to be this dirty, disgusting thing, when the alternatives are actually that, and they're just lining the pockets of politicians like Guilbeault and Mark Carney, who is well invested in green energy technology. It's certainly not helping the little guy.
Yeah, we'll leave and we'll be like Singapore, and you can stay behind and be like North Korea. It's so crazy to think that we could be like Dubai, but they won't let us develop our resources. Like when you go to Dubai, they're just building stuff for the sake of building it. Like you're like, why does that high-rise building look like a cruise ship? Oh, because they can. Because it's so ridiculous and they have the money and they just can. That could be us, but they won't let us exploit our natural resources because Justin Trudeau is a green zealot. Okay, let's read this ad and then we'll get into some more parts of the show. I think more into the culture war issues of the show, now that I've made you sit through all of my theories about why the left does the things that they do. This one is from Be Naked. This is for the men around you and the women who love them. In today's society, it's tough to be a man in a world dominated by overly masculine liberal women. On the flip side, I would suggest that I might be more masculine than most liberal men. I think I might be more capable in a lot of those non-female traditional things, but seem to be male traditional things. Like I hunt and I can fix things. That's just not how it's meant to be. Everywhere we look, it's gender neutral, this product, or made for her, that product. That is why we started a company that embodies the ethos of men's lives matter too. With products that aren't designed to be gender neutral or used by people with pronouns. Our products at Rumble are designed and built for men by men, period. So if you struggle with low energy, mood swings, or hair loss, or if you need to perform better at the gym, maybe in bed, and recover quicker after, throw out all your other garbage supplements and try animal organs. They are traditionally the most nutrient-rich supplements on the planet, but our bison organs are a step above. The grass-fed, non-vaccinated bison are a species where the weak are allowed to die and only the strongest survive. So here's our commitment to you from men who have real confidence in their products. Try this today, and if you don't like it, fine, return it for a refund. Go to benaked.com, code studio, and get 15% off today. One time I ate like a half a bison by myself over the course of a winter, and I didn't realize that I had done it, but I just went to the freezer and took out some bison meat every single day. And then it was like May, and I was like, where did all the bison go? And then I realized that the phone call was coming from inside the house. Okay, let's get into the next one. My computer just went crazy. So Tamara, if you want to pick the next thing for us to talk about.
Well, of course, our radical federal government has called the U.S. pulling out of the Agency for International Development, pulling all of their employees out of the U.S. Agency for International Development, they're calling it a dangerous retreat for foreign aid, and that Canada is deeply concerned about the Trump administration's efforts to, as they put it here in Global News, dismantle the United States' lead foreign aid agency. Federal government officials say amid growing alarm about the impact to global charities and aid program. The administration said this week it is pulling all employees at the U.S. Agency for International Development off the job and out of the field globally by the end of Friday, that's today, unless they are deemed essential. Now, I clicked that link there. The agency's website was replaced with that removal notice. And so I clicked on that removal notice, and they deem anyone designated essential, as the mainstream media puts it, as personnel responsible for mission critical functions, core leadership, and specially designated programs. But otherwise, as of today at 11:59 Eastern, all direct hire personnel will be placed on administrative leave globally, and essential personnel are expected to continue working with, and they'll be informed by last night. So, Sheila, do you know how many millions or perhaps billions of dollars this saves the United States?
Oh, and the trouble it saves. So, besides the amount of money that was spent directly on USAID also funded destructive organizations that cost billions of dollars to the American taxpayer to repair the damage done by USAID. And their funding of these organizations. For example, BLM burned down cities. BLM was funded by USAID. So taxpayers end up on the hook for the damage done by these organizations. And it's like, if you look out of just plug in USAID into X, and you will just see, like, people now are just doing the research. But we're not any better here in Canada, are we? Global affairs is the worst of this. But it's not just global affairs. It's Heritage Canada. It is Health Canada. Even the Department of National Defense funding weird things. But like the big three DEI nonsensical ones that Canada pushes this nonsense on the rest of the world, it's Health Canada, it's Global Affairs, and Heritage Canada. And now that DOGE is taking apart USAID, they're also moving on to other agencies, which make me very happy. For example, the EPA, which has been on my radar since Ghostbusters 1. Because the EPA was the reason those ghosts were released into the world. They are basically kicking people out of the EPA until they figure out all the nonsense that the EPA, so that's the Environmental Protection Agency, has spending their money on. And again, this is the federal government, and Canada does this so well, except we don't see the real cultural problem with this. The EPA funds these environmental charities, and then the environmental charities block the resource initiative. Same thing happens in Canada. The Environment Ministry funds busybodies in the environmental charity sector. They don't actually do any charity work. And then those people lobby to block Canadian oil and gas. Wash, rinse, repeat. We also see it out of Heritage Canada. Heritage Canada gives money to the LGBTQ lobby, and then the LGBTQ lobby attacks conservatives, and they take mayors who don't erect the pride flag to court in small towns. So this is happening in Canada, and this should be a real wake-up call to us. This is something we've been covering at Rebel News for years. It's something the CTF, Canadian Taxpayers Federation, uncovers, but we should all be inspired by what's happening in the United States to now feel impassioned, moved by the spirit to hold our own government to account, especially as the Liberals are on their way out the door. We need to tell the Conservatives, you have the moral authority now to undo all this nonsense and save Canadian taxpayers a bunch of money.
Yeah, exactly. I am so here to see that ripple effect come into Canada. I was just looking up the numbers. USAID gives they have an annual budget of more than 40 billion. That's with a B, $40 billion, according to congressional research. And so this was one of the first orders of business that Trump implemented on his first day in office. Was he immediately froze foreign assistance. And then Elon Musk's DOGE, as you mentioned, the Department of Government Efficiency Office, launched a sweeping review and effort to cut trillions in government spending, and USAID is one of the largest targets, which Musk has called a criminal organization.
Yeah.
So they've moved to dismantle the agency, putting these hundreds of employees on leave and terminating contracts after Musk said he was in the process of shutting down the agency that oversees this foreign aid. And Trump even criticized it as being run by a bunch of radical lunatics.
Yeah, it is.
And again, Musk calls it a criminal organization because it's just funding private interest. It's not actually making anything better in any parts of the world. And it's certainly not benefiting the United States citizens, right, who are paying and funding this department to the tune of $40 billion. That is an astronomical amount.
Well, and let's be clear, it's not just private interests. It's the political interests of the Democrats that's being funded with a $40 billion war chest. And it is also political colonization of the developing world. Like they fund abortion services in Africa, in countries where they don't even have a word to describe the procedure because it is so culturally incompatible with society there. Get this. USAID, the USAID agency, like if this is supposed to be meant for the developing world. Do you need electricity to run a hospital in Senegal? That's what this is supposed to be like, right? To feed the Christians facing extermination in northern Iraq in 2015. That's what this should have been for. They gave $128 million to the World Economic Forum. I think that's cumulative. But why are we giving the world's billionaires, I mean the Western world, but also primarily our friends in the United States, why are they giving the World Economic Forum, the world's billionaires, most powerful people in the world, $130 million for their party in a Swiss village every year? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, there's our hard-earned tax dollars hard at work.
Yeah.
So that they can eat filet mignon and trollop around on their private jets and stay in the utmost swankiest of hotels and not eat the bugs as we're all being told to do with our alternative protein promotion. No, they're eating the steaks and having the drinks and drinking the $12 orange juices. Don't be misled there.
Imagine reading this garbage. If you live in a red state that was hit by a hurricane and you still have a tree on your house and you're like, oh, excuse me, USAID gave $128 million to the World Economic Forum and you have your house just split in half by a hurricane, but you live in a red state, so the Democrats didn't send any help for you. Imagine what reading this news feels like for those people.
The people suffering the devastating effects of the California wildfires, who I think this was a key point when Trump decided to take these actions, was where is the name is eluding me now, FEMA. Where is FEMA?
Mm-hmm.
What's FEMA doing right now? Where are they in their help or emergency response? Nowhere to be found, completely delayed, leaving people stranded. And so, what Trump is doing and what Elon Musk is doing with this Doge ministry, which hopefully we will have one day soon in Canada, is to make sure that these entities are working for the people, not for these foreign aid groups and these supposed charities and just lining the pockets of elite radical agendas, but actually helping to bolster the country where all the money is being funneled from.
Before we move on, I just want to talk about, this is an incredible thing that Trump is doing, but one of the other incredible things that we talked about yesterday on the show that Trump has done is to protect female spaces, particularly when it comes to sport. And full credit to Riley Gaines, the American collegiate swimmer who really brought this issue to light. And here in Canada, we've got April Hutchinson, who has suffered professionally, serving a ban on competition from her sport for refusing to compete against a male athlete who now identifies as a female. Ann Andres. I don't want a dead name. I want to stay on YouTube, but I thought I would make that clear. But if you want to hear from April and you're in the Edmonton area, because April's from Ontario, so she's not in Alberta a whole ton, February 22nd, 2025, she is going to be speaking in one of the best places on the face of the earth, Church in the Vine. Our good friends, Pastors Tracy and Rodney Fortin, are the pastoral team there. So on Saturday, February 22nd, 2025, April Hutchinson, NHL legend Theo Fleury, and Rebel News alumnus Adam Sos are coming to Church in the Vine in Edmonton for Fire and Ice. It's put together by our good friends at Canadians for Truth. You can hear April's incredible story from a traumatic abuse story as a child, to her struggles with addiction, to using her sport to get clean and make a difference for all of us, not just for herself, but all women and girls. You'll hear a story of resilience, her victories, and her fight for fairness in women's sports. So get your tickets now at CanadiansForTruth.ca. I will see you there. My friend Lisa and I are we're just going. We're going to show support for April. Plus, I want to catch up with Pastor Tracy and Rodney. Those of you who remember their story, they faced they were hit with an $80,000 penalty for opening their church during COVID. But through the good work of the people over at the Democracy Fund and through your donations to the Democracy Fund, we were able to have that administrative penalty overturned, so that the church can do good work with that $80,000 instead of paying it to the hurt feelings of health bureaucrats. So anyways, that's Canadians for Truth on February 22nd. Tamara, you can pick the next story.
Yeah, I just wanted to hit the last topic in our headline, which is where the Justin Trudeau Liberals are signing a letter accusing Trump's plan of what he plans to do with Gaza by restoring some form of sanity and livable conditions in the area as ethnic cleansing. Two federal cabinet, this is from the National Post, two federal cabinet ministers and several Liberal MPs have signed their names to a statement condemning U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to relocate Palestinians out of Gaza into neighboring Arab countries as ethnic cleansing. I don't think that really meets the definition of ethnic cleansing, because it sounds like they're just being relocated into a place where they can, actually live more comfortably. But ethnic cleansing refers to something a little bit more darker as far as I'm concerned. But that's the way with the left, who needs definitions when you can just use these inflammatory statements and make people fall in line and get behind whatever it is that you're saying, because they are, the useless eaters that just follow along, and they'll just go along to get along and not actually think critically or for themselves.
I got a real tough time hearing the word ethnic cleansing from the likes who refused to declare what was happening in the Christians in the Nineveh Plain under ISIS, a genocide. They had to be shamed by a Yazidi, a genocide survivor in the House of Commons before they could declare what was happening there, a genocide. And I've been there. It was nothing short of a genocide. These are the same people who refused to declare several times, and some of them still do. Like, for example, Mark Carney. I dug up a clip from a committee where he refused to acknowledge what's happening in Xinjiang province in China to the Uyghurs there to be a genocide. They are being stripped of their Muslim names, their Qurans taken from them, their language taken from them, their entire identities taken from them, and the women are even being sterilized. But that's definitely not a genocide, according to Mark Carney. Why? Because that's where he gets his solar panels from. It's from the slave labor there. And so they're about to elect that guy a leader of their party. So I get a real tough time hearing what amounts to ethnic cleansing in Gaza. No, I just don't take their flawed definition of this. Gaza, if we are to believe the left, they tell me it's destroyed. So we're better to relocate these people from a completely leveled society, again, if you believe the left, that it was just haphazard from the Israelis, which definitely was. But if you believe the arguments of the left, wouldn't it be better to relocate these people to a place where they are culturally compatible and stay within the region, instead of yanking them out of their country and placing them in Canada. Like, they tell me it's not ethnic cleansing if we relocate them to Canada, but it is ethnic cleansing if we relocate them to Jordan when so many of them have Jordanian last names. Give me, like, make it make sense, because none of it does.
Well, and in I think it was 2023, the Liberals voted unanimously in favor of resettling 10,000 Uyghur Muslim refugees from China into, as you've mentioned, into Canada over the course of 2 years. And so how is that not ethnic? Just the use of ethnic cleansing here is just so grotesque of a way to frame this resettlement that has happened. I mean, what about when Canada took in all of these Ukrainian refugees? What about the Syrian refugees? What about, there's all of these other instances where people have been relocated and resettled into regions to escape the devastation of war. And for some reason, this is ethnic cleansing now all of a sudden.
Right. If we resettle them here, it's not ethnic cleansing. If we resettle them within the region where their culture exists, that is ethnic cleansing. Feels like those definitions are opposite and even an exaggeration. It's not ethnic cleansing to keep people in a region where their culture is. Also, like, if they have family in the region, why would you take them out and then now they have like a 2-day journey from Canada, which is onerously expensive, to go back to visit family? Wouldn't you want to stay closer to home if that were the plan?
You're thinking a little too rationally, Sheila. I don't think you're supposed to do that.
I'm doing it again. I'm doing
with
it
the
again.
left. We have another ad read to get to, but I think we might have time to play this clip that's just come out about not even 20 minutes ago. It's apparently leaked audio where Trudeau warns business leaders at the Canada-US Economic Summit that Donald Trump is serious about annexing Canada or making it the 51st state.
In Donald Trump's mind, easier just to take the imperialist approach, the sort of the manifest destiny theory back on again here, and sort of take Canada over. Similar to comments we've heard him make about Greenland, for example, which also has critical minerals. We have tried to sort of isolate and boost the audio so it's a little bit easier to hear, but we do have a short snippet of what our equipment was able to capture that Trudeau said next.
Mr. Trump has it in mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is absorbing our country. And it is a real thing. In my conversation with him.
Okay, and then it cuts out, but he's sort of telling the crowd that this is his impression coming away. Now, is this surprising to hear him say this in this form? Not necessarily.
I'm not sure what to make of that one. He could have been talking about the tariffs being a real threat. I'll have to listen a bit closer to that.
I don't know if Donald Trump is serious. I don't know if Justin Trudeau is bright enough to know the difference. And that's where I think the problem is. We're hearing Justin Trudeau's idiotic, empty-headed interpretation of a conversation or statements made by President Trump. And is Justin Trudeau bright enough to understand the tone and tenor of that conversation? In my expert assessment, definitely not. So I don't know if Donald Trump meant that. But again, I reiterate that in the joking, there's the real heart of the truth of it all. And that is Donald Trump's incessant teasing of taking us over reveals that under Justin Trudeau, our economy is in shambles. Our military is in shambles. Canadians are demoralized, beaten down, and broke. And our society is in absolute decay from crime, fentanyl, poverty, and just a malaise, dissatisfied with society. The Canadian dream is gone, and the Liberals killed it. And so that's the truth of what Trump is saying when he teases about making us the 51st state. is that anybody could take us over economically or militarily. And that has to do with Justin Trudeau's management of the place. And by goodwill and good neighborliness, the Americans haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I would say mismanagement of the country. And again, I mentioned this the other day on the live stream. Trump is a businessman. He sees the vast amount of natural resources that we have available that are not being utilized, that are being suppressed by the Liberal government. And he's pointing out some very real and clear vulnerabilities that we have under the mismanagement of the Justin Trudeau Liberals, who just appointed his friends from his wedding party to top ministerial positions rather than appointing who's the best fit for the job. I mean, this has been a consistent theme of the Liberals' reign of terror, as I put it, is to hire and appoint and select people based on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in this case, the inclusion of you in Trudeau's closest friend circle, and not on the merits of who's the real best fit for the job, but rather who you know, how close you are to Trudeau, how much he trusts you, and whether or not you went to his wedding.
Yeah, or if you were his babysitter, like Dominic LeBlanc, who I guess continues that role as the finance minister. We've got just a little bit more context from that statement from our friends at the Western Standard. This is what they have Justin Trudeau saying. God, they're so good at headlines over at the Western Standard, by the way. He says they're of the Americans. They're very aware of our resources, of what we have, and they very much want to be able to benefit from those, Trudeau said in an answer to a question from the floor after media had been ushered out of the room. So he didn't think that the media would hear this. But Mr. Trump has it in mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is absorbing our country, and it is a real thing. There is something really telling in this, is that Justin Trudeau is actually acknowledging the wealth of our natural resources, were they to be unleashed. But he's not. And the Americans are willing to do that. So I guess the real question for Justin Trudeau is, if the Americans acknowledge the wealth of our natural resources, why have you not allowed Canada to benefit from those? Anyway.
And we'll probably never know, since he is the outgoing prime minister, and we'll see what happens on the political front in the coming weeks and month ahead. I know that the federal court will hear a motion to unprorogue Parliament next week. And if that's successful, I don't know how timely that could be before the end of March, which is when Parliament's set to resume. I think it's March 25th. How successful that might be in getting them back to business a little bit sooner rather than later. But it's interesting times we're living in, with no federal leadership, and yet the leader that's stepped down and resigned still leading the country. So
and
yay,
promising
Canada.
to be vindictive. Promising to be vindictive.
Ruthless in his final weeks. Thank you so much, Justin Trudeau.
Okay, we got one more ad read, and then I think we wrap the show. This one is from Rumble. It's one that's incredibly important to the survival of Rumble, of course, but also to us here at Rebel News. You see, when Rumble first started in 2013, they built a platform for the small creator. They didn't censor or have biases. They were fair and treated all creators equally. No one thought platforms would censor political conversation or censor opinions on COVID, but they did. Facebook admitted they felt a pressure from the Biden and Harris administration. We know in Canada, Health Canada was leaning hard on Facebook to censor the common man who was just sharing their experiences on COVID. Rumble did not, however. They held the line. They are attacked daily by giving us a voice to talk to you. They're attacked in corporate media. They're attacked by governments like France, and Canada. But we'll get to that. They are attacked from brand advertisers who refuse to work with them. Corporate America is fighting to remove speech. Rumble is fighting to keep it. Rumble won't survive with brand advertisers. They don't get much of it. Watching our show right now, as you are on Rumble, is the most they can ask of you. But if you really believe in this fight and you have the means, one major way you can help Rumble survive is by joining Rumble Premium. What you can do right now is go cancel your YouTube Premium subscription and just apply that to Rumble Premium. Just, why support the guys who censor everybody and who did the government's bidding? So You can join the community that believes in the First Amendment and believes in our human right to free speech. Rumble is offering 10% off with the promo code STUDIO when you purchase an annual subscription. Go to rumble.com/premium. Use the promo code STUDIO. Like I said, if you have the means and believe in the cause, now's the time to join Rumble Premium. But if you don't have the means, and I understand definitely if you don't, the government's picking your pocket harder than ever before. We're just happy if you watch us on Rumble. And I think that's it. Unless we have any chats, Tamara, I will let you wrap up the show.
I don't think we do. All right. So right on the nose, almost an hour and a half, our new limit for the daily, now daily, once again, live stream. Thank you everybody who made this all possible, especially our super producer, Olivia, who makes sure that we have those clips and videos to share with you and grabs those headlines and things that we discuss kind of on the fly for added context on screen. It's always really helpful for the viewer to see that stuff that we're referring to. And all the bodies behind the scenes who, write the copy, get the links ready. And it's Sheila and I up front and center, but there are so many people behind us that make sure that this show is possible and runs smoothly. So thanks to all of them. We will be back here same time and place on Monday with, I think, Sheila and myself, or maybe even Ezra. I know, obviously, as the head honcho. As the head honcho, everybody loves Ezra. So it's always a hit when he is able to free up some time in his crazy busy schedule to join. And have a great weekend, everybody. Try to stay safe and stay sane.